has adjusted that track a little bit more south. And so, again, this is an inexact science, of course, subject to change, but they're now forecasting it to strike land basically at the Charlotte-Sarasota County border. And if you look at that area and you're familiar with that area, you know there's a lot of potential for flooding and storm surge in that part of the state. You also, because of the track it's taking, expect a major impact somewhere in that area, but it's also going to continue moving throughout the state, and it's actually going to exit probably somewhere Volusia, Flagler, St. Johns counties. So that's going to take tropical storm force winds at a minimum up through almost like it's riding I-4. So you're going to have impacts in places like Polk County, Orange County, Volusia County. That's going to be significant winds. It's also going to be a lot of rainfall. And so those areas are already saturated. You're going to end up with more. That is going to cause hazards for trees falling down. It will likely interrupt power for many communities in that part of the state, and this is going to be working its way. You'll have the first landfall will be tomorrow night, Wednesday night, but it's going to meander through the state all the rest of Wednesday night, all of Thursday, and it's going to exit most likely sometime on Friday morning. So this is going to be a lot of impacts, and they will be felt far and wide throughout the state of Florida. I want to commend our counties on Florida's Gulf Coast for all their hard work in doing preparations, particularly over the last week. We also have a lot of residents in those counties. Many of them know the drill, but many of them are also new to Florida. And you've seen all reports that we've received from Lee and Charlotte and Sarasota all the way into Tampa Bay area is by and large people are taking appropriate precautions. When you look at storm surge of this nature, that is a very life-threatening hazard when you're talking about 10 feet, 12 feet of storm surge, which you could see in certain parts of this when it makes landfall. It's also going to produce a massive amount of rain. It is going to produce major flooding. The storm, when it impacts land, it's expected, yes, it will weaken, but it will also slow, which means it's just going to be churning out rain, moving at a snail's pace. That rain is going to pile up very quickly in different parts of Southwest Florida. So these hazards are real. We want people to be able to take the appropriate precautions. Listen to your local emergency management officials. There have been evacuations now in place for some time up and down the Gulf Coast of Florida. As the storm moves in, you're going to potentially have directives issued from folks in the interior of our state or even on the east coast of the state for low-lying areas that absolutely could end up flooding due to this storm. So listen to that and heed those instructions and make sure you're doing what you need to do to be able to protect yourself. So we now have over 2.5 million people that are under some type of evacuation order, and that includes people in counties such as Charlotte, Citrus, Hernando, Hillsborough, Lee, Levy, Manatee, Pasco, Pinellas, Sarasota counties, Collier, Gilchrist, Glades, Highland, and Taylor counties. Make sure you know your evacuation zone. You go to floridadisaster.org/plan-prepare, floridadisaster.org/plan-prepare. We can rebuild property, we can fix infrastructure, you can fix your home. You don't get a mulligan when your personal safety is at risk. And so we know this thing is going to be hitting the state directly sometime tomorrow evening. You still have some time, but that time is rapidly running out. Florida Department of Transportation and Florida Highway Patrol have been in coordination. Once the traffic on I-4 reduced to under 40 miles an hour and you started to see the buildup, they have activated the emergency shoulder use on I-4 eastbound from Tampa to Orlando. This will add capacity and will allow the evacuations to move more quickly. In this area, motorists can use the left shoulder. And then in Orlando, where the shoulder use ends, there are several roads where motorists can move north or south, or they can continue on I-4 in the normal traffic lanes. And we do emergency shoulder use rather than the one-way traffic, because you still need to be able to get people into where the storm is coming with supplies and all sorts of other things. And so this has been studied by this department for a decade, and this has proven to be the superior way to do it. There is not yet emergency shoulder use on I-75 because the traffic is flowing. If that traffic does go to the point where it's under 40 miles an hour sustained, then they will execute that. Why wouldn't you just execute it regardless? Well, because it's hazardous to have people going 75 miles an hour on a shoulder, and that's where the traffic has been by and large. But we understand that that can change, and the FDOT has been instructed by me and Kevin to make sure that they make those appropriate adjustments. We've also suspended tolls on additional roads. We had all the tolls in the Tampa Bay area, of course, as well as I-75 going into Alligator Alley. We now have State Road 91, the Turnpike Mainland from Osceola Parkway north to I-75, State Road 417, Southern Connector Extension, Central Florida Greenway and Seminole Expressway, State Road 429, the Western Beltway, State Road 408, State Road 429, State Road 528, the Beach Line, State Road 414, State Road 538, State Road 453, State Road 551, I-4 Express, and State Road 552. So those are all the main toll roads in Central Florida. We have the Tampa Bay area, you have it going into Alligator Alley, and now you have that. A list of all the facilities can be found at fdot.gov/Ian toll suspension, fdot.gov/Ian toll suspension. And as we continue to monitor the path, if there are more tolls that need to be suspended, of course, we will do it. We announced earlier today, but want to make sure everyone knows that if you are seeking shelter in a hotel, that Expedia has partnered with Visit Florida to provide access to hotel rooms in our state. If you go to expedia.com/Florida, expedia.com/Florida, you can see what is available. And again, if you're called upon to evacuate, you don't need to necessarily evacuate hundreds of miles away. You're being called to evacuate because of the threat of storm surge and flood risk. If you get to higher ground, most of the places in the state of Florida are going to be able to handle hurricane force winds, and so you'll be able to be there for the storm, then hopefully return as soon as possible. Don't leave your pets behind. Helpful information about planning for your pet is also available at floridadisaster.org/plan-prepare, floridadisaster.org/plan-prepare. Almost every pet shelter is going to be pet friendly. People understand that that's important, and it is important that we're taking care of our pets. So as of 3 p.m., almost 100 shelters, including more than 50 special needs shelters, have been opened, mostly along the Gulf Coast region of the state of Florida. There's more shelters that are constantly being added, and particularly as the track of the storm changes, you're going to see more counties shift into that mode in different parts of Florida. Go to floridadisaster.org/shelters if you want to see the shelter availability, floridadisaster.org/shelters. We now have 56 school districts that have announced school closures. If you want the most up-to-date information on that, go to floridadoe.org/storminfo. We are at over 5,000 with the Florida National Guard. We have 2,000 guardsmen from neighboring states. National Guard has 3 Chinook helicopters staged and ready to respond, and they actually have 6 more en route. We have 5 urban search and rescue teams activated. We have 3 additional teams on standby as needed. And we have FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, has officers placed all around the state in anticipation of heavy rains and flooding. They have high water vehicles as well as shallow draft boats that are available for immediate deployment in a search and rescue situation. We also have aviation assets for FWC that are on standby. Of course, Highway Patrol is surge personnel, and they will continue to do that as needed. And we'll hear from the Admiral, but U.S. Coast Guard has staged 21 rotary wing aircraft, 9 fixed wing aircraft, 4 cutters. They also have shallow draft vessels ready to provide search and rescue assistance in flooded areas should that be necessary. As of today, 100% of operating long-term care facilities do have a generator on site, and we're happy about that. We now have over 30,000 linemen across the various utility companies, both investor-owned and municipal, as well as electrical co-ops, that are staged for powered restoration across the state. And so we anticipate that that will grow. And we also anticipate that the needs for power restoration have grown as the track of the storm has changed. I mean, we were here a couple days ago. They were looking at maybe it skirting the Gulf Coast and ended up impacting someplace in northern Florida. That obviously would be less power impact than having a direct entry into Southwest Florida and then cutting across the state where it's going to impact millions and millions of people. So they all understand that, and the impact area really spans all of their different customer service areas. I mean, you're going to have FPL, Duke, TECO, all of them are going to be impacted by this, and all of them have people that are ready to go. We've gotten at Florida DEM about 730 requests for assistance. Over 600 have been fulfilled. Others are on the way. Some can only be fulfilled once the storm hits, and they will be. As the track of the storm has shifted more south, Kevin Guthrie has shifted more resources to the southwest portion of the state, and so you have folks that are there, medical, shelter, a whole host of different ways to be able to help the folks there. We are bringing in more than 1 million gallons of fuel to support response efforts. We have 10 feeding kitchens staged in the area through our nonprofit partners, and then 15 hospitals and over 100 healthcare facilities have been evacuated across the Gulf Coast. For facilities that are not evacuating, it is our expectation that visitation is not restricted and patients are still able to see their families, but we do appreciate being able to speak with a number of folks with major hospital systems. If you have hospitals in low-lying area, they have a plan. They know this, they could be called upon to do it, and they've executed those plans, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate them working hard to keep these patients safe. Again, if you have any questions about what to do over the next, obviously, if you're on the west coast of Florida, this is something that is much more imminent. You are going to get, as we get into Thursday and Friday, you're going to see impacts all the way to the east coast of Florida. This thing's going to exit the state of Florida and most likely end up getting stronger, riding into the Atlantic, and then probably hitting Georgia, South Carolina, someplace like that. So this thing's the real deal. It is a major, major storm. I want the Admiral to come up and talk about some of the things that they're doing, and also just for me to be able to say we appreciate all the folks in the Coast Guard. Many are Florida residents, many are stationed here, and we appreciate the great job that you guys do.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. So as the Governor said, I'm Rear Admiral Brendan McPherson. I'm the Senior Operational Commander for the Coast Guard in the Southeast, including the state of Florida. And we are working very closely with our local, state, and federal partners to prepare for this very dangerous, life-threatening storm. Our first #1 priority is search and rescue and saving lives. So in order to do that, we've already dispatched 30 aircraft to the region. One of our largest air stations is right here in Clearwater. And so we've evacuated those aircraft. We've moved them to West Palm Beach. We have aircraft pre-positioned there, Miami, as well as Mobile, Alabama. Those aircraft will be ready to move into the area as soon as the conditions allow them to fly in there safely. I'd like to take this opportunity for anybody that is second guessing. There's still time to evacuate. I would encourage you to do so if you are in one of those evacuation zones. While it sounds like we have a lot of resources, and we do, we really think it's more important that people evacuate, follow the local officials' guidance on that because of the strain it can put on it and the dangers to them and our air crews. In addition to saving lives, the other thing we're really focused on is being ready to reopen the ports as soon as the conditions allow. We have Coast Guard cutters and teams specially trained to be able to do that. Standing by as soon as conditions allow, we'll be working with our partners from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, along with NOAA, to conduct surveys, identify any hazards, and then open those waterways so that we can move commodities into the port of Tampa Bay as soon as possible. We recognize that those ports are critical to the safety, security, and the prosperity of the region. In addition to that, we'll also be prepared to respond to any spills or hazardous spills in or along the waterways, and we'll continue to work with our local partners along with EPA to do that. And finally, we will be ready to receive any mission assignments we may receive from the state of Florida through Federal Emergency Management Agency. And lastly, as the governor indicated, the Coast Guard is not only responding to a hurricane, we are impacted by this as well. Nearly 5,000 Coast Guard men and women and families call this area home, and so we're doing everything we can to support them, to provide the assistance they need as they evacuate and their loved ones stand the watch. Thank you, Governor.
Okay, Kevin Guthrie.
Good evening. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. You've been right here with us the entire time, so I certainly appreciate that, and I know the men and women of the Florida Division of Emergency Management do as well. Florida Division of Emergency Management remains in constant contact with all 67 counties. I have called about a dozen of those individuals in the highest impact area today. We currently have more than 700 active missions, as the governor has already mentioned. This includes coordination of resources such as trucks of food, water, generators, pumps, and most importantly, staff to staff shelters. We're mobilizing and deploying over 100,000 tarps to protect homes from storm impacts after the disaster. 5 Florida urban search and rescue teams are activated and will be prepared to deploy to impacted areas around the state as response and recovery efforts begin. We have federal USAR teams from Texas, Virginia, Indiana here to help us as well. We also have another team from Ohio that is currently mobilizing. We have state emergency management agencies from around the country that have mobilized. We have about a dozen stretching all the way from Montana and Colorado all the way to the East Coast that have come in to assist us. We're currently coordinating the provision of meals for first responders staged in Orange County. If residents have any questions about resources for Hurricane Ian, I urge them to reach out to their local emergency management agency or public safety office. If they cannot find the information there, they can go to our website at floridadisaster.org/plan-prepare. At this point in time, I urge everyone that is in an evacuation zone, that has been asked to evacuate, the time is now. You must evacuate now. There will be a point in time where you will not be safe to travel the roads. The time to evacuate is now. Get on the road. I want to further emphasize this, and many of you know that I was a local emergency manager before I came here. There will come a point in time when local public safety officials will not be able to respond to your help, your cry for help. They will not be able to do it. And you may be left to fend for yourself. Again, the time to evacuate is now. Governor, I want to thank you for your continued leadership and your partnership. Again, you've been steadfast and right here with us the entire time. Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things I think in terms of the evacuations, of course, you have some areas that are in barrier islands, of course, would be very prone to storm surge. You also have in Southwest Florida, really throughout the state, but certainly in the communities that may get hit with the initial impact of the eye of the storm, you've got a lot of mobile homes, and you have folks, and actually the way those are done, they actually can withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds. In South Florida, I think they have to do up to 110 to be certified, but you're looking at a Category 3 storm that is strengthening. It will become a Category 4 storm, and it may even be a Category 4 storm when it makes impact in what looks to be Southwest Florida. So that is not a risk that you want to take if you are living in some type of mobile home or manufactured housing. And I know a lot of people have left and have sought shelters, but it's my understanding that not everybody has. You still have time to do it. You do not have to evacuate hundreds of miles. Obviously, if you have friends, family, some of that, hotels, that's preferable. But as a last resort, these shelters are open. and I would just urge people to take advantage of that. I know it's not easy sometimes to leave your home, and I know people don't want to see anything bad happen when they get back. But the stakes are high. This is a very powerful storm. It will weaken once it gets onshore, and by the time it moves through the state, it's not going to cut through the whole state as a Cat 4, but it very well may make impact as a Cat 4, and that's really, really serious business. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
Governor, how would you characterize your conversations with President Biden as Ian approaches?
So I have not personally spoken with the president, but FEMA has approved our pre-landfall request. We've had Gracia here really since the weekend. Gracia's been here. She's always around here. And so we feel like we have a good relationship with FEMA. I'm happy to brief the president if he's interested in hearing what we're doing in Florida. My view on all this is you got people's lives at stake, you got their property at stake, and we don't have time for pettiness. We got to work together to make sure we're doing the best job for them. So my phone line is open, and we're happy. But we do appreciate the quick approval of the pre-landfall declaration.
Can you clarify the 2.5 or about 2.5 million people that are in hurricane evacuation zones? How many of those are in mandatory evacuation zones, and how many are voluntary?
I think they're almost all are mandatory. I would say there's some counties that just don't do mandatory. Their view is we're going to issue this guidance. They urge them to do it, but their view is we're not going to go take people out of their homes or whatnot. So some of that may be a distinction without a difference. It just depends on how the counties apply it.
Are you hearing anything about the hotel situation across, interior Florida, where people are leaving the West Coast, heading inland? Is it filling up and backed up at hotels?
So we have members from the FRLA that are a part of our ESF 18, which is our business and industry sector, just right here on the floor to give us that information. Right now, they have not come to us and said that there is, no vacancy in essence. So again, I reiterate what the governor has already said. Expedia.com/Florida to start finding hotel rooms if you're in a situation where you have the means to pay for a hotel. Certainly there's still vacancy in the state of Florida for that. If you cannot afford that, then you need to be moving to a shelter, and you need to be doing that now.
Yes.
FEMA Administrator Chris Wells said today that she acknowledged concerns that Florida, as was said, lacks response to the storm so far, and that there's some folks that are living
Give me
there.
a break. That is nonsense. Stop politicizing, okay? Stop it. We declared a state of emergency when this thing wasn't even formed. We've had people in here, you've had counties doing, they've done a lot of hard work, and honestly, you're trying to attack me, I get, but you're attacking these other people who've worked very hard, and so that's just totally false. I don't think we've ever, certainly since I've been governor, declared a state of emergency this early. We made sure that we were very inclusive with it. We said that there was a lot of uncertainty, and we've worked to make sure the preparations that have been done and all this stuff, you talk to the people at the counties when they've needed something, stuff gets there very quickly because of what Kevin and his team have done.
Can we also get you to talk about the historical significance of this storm surge? I mean, we have had hurricanes in the past that have had a lot of water, but are you doing anything differently because of the amount of water and the way it's looking like it could land, as you said, sit in a part of the state for so long?
Well, I think that's why you have evacuations that have been ordered in the low-lying areas. And again, that's a county decision, but it's a decision we've supported and we've worked with them on because you do have potential historic storm surge. Now, we were here 24 hours ago. You were looking at maybe 10, 12 feet in the Tampa Bay area. Now, that has shifted to where that type of surge may be further down the coast in southwest Florida. You have Tampa is still going to get potentially significant storm surge as well. And so that is something at that level is life-threatening. You also have the situation where you could have almost like Hurricane Harvey was in Houston, where it gets onshore and is just slowly moving and meandering, dumping water and water and water, and that's going to pile up, and that's going to cause a lot of problems with flooding. And so, we've been talking about that the whole time. People understand that that's why the evacuations have not just been the barrier islands, but areas that are susceptible to that type of flooding. And I think if you look at like Charlotte, Charlotte County and some of those areas, you have a potential for major inundation there, and it's not just the people that live on the coast. And so that message, I think, has been delivered by the local emergency managers, and I think they've done a good job.
Governor, on power restoration, you had mentioned because the storm is going to be basically sitting over much of the state for 2 days, maybe more, should people expect to have restoration crews not be able to access that area for a good while, more than usual? And do we have crews in areas, I guess, southeast Florida that can get in there when it's appropriate?
So right. I mean, we've said from the beginning, people are going to lose power, and you need to be prepared for that. And it's not going to be something that's going to automatically just go back on very quickly, because you're going to have extensive damage, and you're going to have crews be able to get in. Roads are going to have to be cleared. Some places where they may have to go over bridges, those are going to have to be inspected. So people should just understand that. Now, there's a whole host of manpower that is stationed to be able to get in there as soon as possible, because clearly we want people to be protected when the storm hits. That's first thing, protect lives. Then if there's somebody that's in jeopardy after the storm hits, the search, the rescue, we have assets that are stationed for that, very, very significant. Then in terms of what do you do to get the normal society back, resumption of key services, starting with power, obviously fuel, communications. I've been in contact with AT&T, Verizon. They have an enormous amount of assets, and so those assets are deployed, and they're going to be responding, because we know how important it is to be able to communicate. We do have fuel contracts, and we'll work to make sure the fuel is done. But I think it also depends on the extent of the damage. I mean, for example, Kevin has been working with the utilities to make sure that if there's damage to transformers, that we have the ability to get a replacement. We're not exactly living in a great supply chain environment right now, and so that's something that we've been sensitive to, and Kevin's been sensitive to. So you may have problems there. Now, if you have the replacement part, that makes it better, but that's going to cause that. How extensive is the damage to where these crews can get in? Now, FDOT and Highway Patrol, they're going to work to clear these roads, because that's something that's very significant. But I would also say you're going to likely have power go out in a lot of parts of the state as this thing goes through. I mean, you're going to have tropical storm force winds in, say, Orange County, in Seminole, in Volusia, Flagler, those places. There's going to be trees knocked down. There's going to be power lines knocked down. So there's going to be a lot to take care of. So we've got the manpower ready. They're going to work as hard as they can. But I don't think anyone should go into this thinking, that somehow they may lose power for like one night and then it's just all going to snap back on. You're talking about really, really significant impacts.
In terms of supplies, because obviously we have the ports closed down, and I know there's some concern with fuel, obviously, but are there other impacts that the general consumer across Florida might experience as we go through this process? Because if we have the ports closed down, we may not have the commodities coming in. And I don't know if that's you or...
Well, the ports understand the vital role they play. They have to make decisions based on safety, which we understand, but they're all committed to immediately opening, as soon as the storm passes, and they understand how important that is. I do think, though, one thing maybe a little bit different about this storm is just, okay, the storm happens. Unfortunately, there will be damage. We get into the future because of the supply chain problems writ large, not tied to a port being closed for a couple days. Replacing things in your house, doing things like that, it probably will take a little longer than it did in the past. And that's not anything unique to Florida. That's just the fact that we have so many interruptions that we've seen, and the supply chain has been struggling for quite some time now. But at the end of the day, the ports understand the vital role they play. We're committed to doing whatever we need to do to help to make sure that, and I know FDOT is as well, and we want to get the goods coming back as soon as possible. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.